this piece in time that we went over.
Okay.
6,500 words. Where all these reprobates
Here's
and
my
the
little
Democrat
fireside
organizations
chat.
and the front groups and all the rest of them.
Here's my
got
fire
together
though.
in order to do exactly what we're talking about in part. Changing the election laws, among other things. So it's
Like to challenge the wisdom of Dennis Prager and Mark Levin and all the great ones.
The press reported it. It must be true.
We will have to talk about Trump.
And so now they had a little bit of taste. They've destroyed California.
And how, it's the Democrats' fault now. Let's point our finger at the Democrats. See. Some poor people have to live by the railroad tracks, so it's not as nice over there, you see. The lower class people over there, So what I'm trying to say is, you gotta be careful about complaining. Because there's a really good verse. Complaining is as the sin of witchcraft. It's one of the another forgotten verses of the Bible. So if we look at what happened to the people when they left Egypt, after they were spared in the plague, and Pharaoh said, "Get them out of here. Go ahead, Moses, take them." And that was the great parting of the Red Sea, all those great things. Well, it's funny to me that I'll do something like this, try to give some truth. And there's people telling people, don't listen to this guy with his lifestyle. But if there's fire in my words, I'm trying to get you not to look at me, but to look at the coming king. Well, that might be part of the thing. You see what I'm saying? Because if you're looking towards the king, then you're not worried about all of these. So let's go back to the children of Israel, which, if the children of Israel, way back in the Moses day, were like the sons of Abraham, as many as the sands of the sea and the stars in the sky, I don't think we really should try to figure out who is who. So, back to those children of Israel with Moses, who left Egypt. One of the first things they did after they were fed manna from heaven, which was everything that they needed to sustain them daily. But if they took too much, then it would rot. So they had to keep their faith. But they were called stiff-necked because all they did was look down, and they never looked up to their provider. And they would complain as they looked down. So, like, instead of looking up to their provider to help them get to the promised land, well, they were busy looking down at the dirt because they were in the desert. Of course, Egypt was kind of like desert too, but I don't know. I never lived over there, so I don't want to judge too much. But what I'm trying to say is, in the wilderness, it's easy to look down at the sand and to grumble. And when you have less than you had before, especially as slaves, they were worked to the bone, but then they were fed garlic and peppers and onions and, well, all those beautiful things. And so instead of remembering the slavery, which they were in, no, they focused on the garlic and those tasty treats that they got after work. So, if you look at what's happening now, there's a lot of complaining. Now, most of the complaining that's best to do is best to, if it's good complaining, if you know what I'm saying, if it's the kind of complaining God would do about false prophets, He might be telling some of us to beware of them. And it might be kind of our idea to kind of complain to the false prophets, like, what are you doing? This doesn't look like truth. And try to love them and test them to see if they are our brethren or if they are of another father, serving a prince and not the king. And one of the best ways to find that out is to see how their heart is, because from the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. And if you look at what Matthew says, and what happened in Matthew when he came as a king, he got pretty upset with the pastors back then, because they were all teaching doctrines of men and evangelizing sons of hell. He actually called them proselytizing to make twice the sons of hell that they were themselves. And he also said that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees and the scribes, you will have no part in the kingdom. So, in these days, as everybody's getting more broke with the fake money that's turning from dollars to pesos, and they're trusting in princes and presidents and doctrines of men that make sons of hell, and not looking for a coming king or a kingdom to come or a golden age to pay for the golden rule, well, you've got to wonder, is there some complaining going on? Because if you go to a church and it has doctrines of men that make sons of hell, you will usually find them complaining about other people. Either how they believe or what their doctrines are compared to our doctrines and all these silly things. But if you look carefully at what they're saying, from the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks, if they do not include the king in any of their talk of Jesus, it might be the Jesus I never knew, and nor the Jesus you want to know, because if that is not a king, that would be a princely one who's appearing to be an angel of light. And you must be very wary of who you trust in a day when we are drowning in 7 seas of lies. And if you look at what's going to happen to those lies in Revelation 22, you will see that they are all dried out. And I'm beginning to imagine quite a storm filled with some of these false teachers who are preaching doctrines of men and trying to hold their four walls up, and those followers that are within those four walls and trusting those doctrines that got them there. Well, let's just say that there are some doctrines in many of the churches that, well, they're not going to look good when the king comes in Revelation 2. So first look at Revelation 2. Look at these Nicolaitans and look at the synagogue of Satan and ask yourself, does your church look for a king that every knee on earth will bow to? And remember that the verse says nothing about most of them doing it from hell. But remember that the demons will do it if they are in hell. So that's why it says even in hell every knee will bow. But it doesn't say people will be there. So we need to be very weary of trying to decide who will be in hell on that day when it says that every knee on earth will bow. Because if it's to the glory of God the Father, I would think the Father would be most glorified if every knee on earth was bowing, not some from hell. And if we don't know how that judgment works, and we do know that those that serve the King will be judged first, along with those resurrected ones who we get to be united with, like Grandma and Grandpa and all those great ones that we knew so long ago, well, that would be putting your trust in the good things, like mustard seed faith that grows. You see, because from the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. So if it's goodness, then goodness grows. But if it's complaining, well, that can shrink the heart. And it doesn't quite make the Holy Spirit too happy. Now, I'm not going to say it will be blasphemy, but it is a beastly way to start. And if you continue in it too long, you wouldn't want to get too witchy for the king. Because if you've only been complaining all the time to him, well, he might easily be able to say, "Depart from me, you who practice iniquity." Because witchcraft and complaining, if they are, like the verse says, don't complain and grumble, which is as the sin of witchcraft. Well, that might get you a little yeasty for the king, and make it so he might tell you, "Depart from me, I don't know you who work iniquity." So where is your heart? Is it complaining? Because you see, as those ones that left Egypt after the plague, because they had the blood on the doorpost, well, after they wandered in the desert, pretty much in circles, because they could not find their way, as they kept their heads down and complained and grumbled all the time, until when they got to the promised land, they had taught themselves to be fearful. And as they saw these big men in the land, there were only 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, that were ready to take the land. But the rest of them were still with their heads down, going, "Oh, there's no way. We can't do this. I'm better off in Egypt. I had some garlic over there. They weren't fighting us. These look like big men, and even though these grapes are the biggest we've ever seen, well, so were these men. They might be like Nephilim or something. Who knows? We can't take them on." Well, so what did they get? Well, they didn't get that promised land, see? They've actually been losing a lot ever since. Every time they get in this idea that, poor me, life really sucks. and then they kind of lose that relationship with their God. So, wherever you are, whatever you're in, talk to your king. Thank him for what he's done for you, how he's gotten you through this far. Ask him to keep you going through these times, and to learn how to count it all joy, even in those darkest of times. Because if your heart stays good, doesn't complain and get witchy poo, well, then you might be more of the king's type, with a heart that won't fade when the storm gets a little rough. Because you see, we are kind of like in an ocean now with the seas of lies. And if you're not on the rudder quite straight and headed north to that star, well, there's many seas of doctrines of men that can steer you quite afar. But if you pay attention to the complaining heart of a doctrine of men, you will see that it won't get you too far. Because if the king, when he came, he told even those dens of thieves that if only they would follow the two greatest commandments, they could have wrapped up all of the law and the prophets. But maybe if we just started with that again and see if we could work it out, stop trying to figure out who's not good enough, just like they did to the king when he came. Funny how the king came in a homeless form, just like the Pharisees used to pray, "Thank you, Lord, that I'm not like one of these." Well, if you don't want to be like your king, you might end up where the Pharisees ended up. Which, let me say, I'm sure there will be plenty more to join them there. Because you see, many envision ruling planets, including maybe Elon Musk. Well, he might definitely be in a cold-blooded planet where some vaccine will keep his blood below 90 degrees, so he can never have hot blood and passion from God, because he's too hell-bound for that in his heart, you see. Because many of these people, when they get above in their worldly things, they think of others not worthy like them, and look down on all of these, and that is where they decide, kind of like Lucifer, that they can rule. No need for God here. Well, you see, complaining, it's not God's way at all. And it does work for witches, because they always have an ugliness that comes from their heart. So beware the witchy attitude that came to those children with Moses. And even Moses got so stressed out that he yelled when he shouldn't have and tried to take credit for something he shouldn't have at a rock. But lest we blame him too much, the children didn't really make it either. So it's all about where is your heart. And are you complaining about what you are in now? What do you expect that's for? Don't you see that sometimes what you're going through now is to prepare you for what's to come? And if you pass this test quite well, you might be rewarded for many years to come. So take a small bite of this apple. It's not that bad. You see, this is the apple that the king gave you. You have to count it all joy when you go through these trials and even, yes, tribulation. Because the trying of your heart, it endures and it makes you stronger for your king. Because when the chaff does come to separate from the whore Babylon, and it will come quite soon, you need to be solid like a rock for your king, not wavering like those winds of the sea. No. You need to understand that the King of Kings, he's been highly exalted already, and it's time to give him the worship he deserves. So do it now. Do not wait, and do not complain to your king. Thank him for what he gives you, and ask him to help you in all of these things, and to help you to give him glory, and never to complain, no matter how bad things may seem, because he has a big plan for you. If you are on his team. But he doesn't want no double-minded, dirty crosses or greedy ones. No. He wants full-hearted, non-wavering brides. A bride ready for the bridegroom, pure of heart, not wavering, not trusting any doctrines of men that are clearly shown in your word. Think about the JWs and how they are so called a cult because they base their religion so on works and so talk of a kingdom to come. But if you look at Jesus' words, especially in Matthew, there might be more truth to them than we know. Because Jesus never talked about grace with no work. And he did say that we will be judged by how we serve the King. So always good to double check what's coming out of your heart and how much time you spend with the King. Because if there's a good time to spend a sweet hour of prayer, this, my dear friend, would be it. Sometimes it's good to just disconnect and spend time opening your heart to the King and asking him how you can serve him and please him more each day to make his kingdom come. His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And if that's done each day in your heart, well, the complaining can get quite scarce. And that, my dear friend, would put a smile on my King's face, as far as I understand his word. So just focus on how you talk to your King. And if you must complain in a way that glorifies the King. empty train. So you understand what I'm saying about my king? And how he doesn't need complaining now. No finger pointing, no trusting in strange doctrines. But he needs a wholehearted love for the king. So please remember these things and do them. Check yourself each day. Are you complaining in any way? And who is it to, and what is it about, and why? And is that what's the abundance of your heart that the mouth is speaking? Is that what the king would say? Well done, my good and faithful servant. Well, I don't know. But it might be good for you to know before he comes to see what's in our hearts and why. So remember, complaining is as a sin of witchcraft. And the king's not looking for witches or warlocks for the kingdom. But we all have our tough times. And I have done my share of grumbling. So don't let me say that I've never been there. But I have learned, after many years, if I was to grumble, I would ask God, why? Why is it me? Why this? And usually, He gives me an idea. To stop complaining, for starts. So try it. Try saying thanks for whatever you're given, no matter what it is. And remember that verse, count it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials and tribulations, knowing that the testing of your faith makes it stronger. That's what we need, strong faith that moves mountains, not doubtful doctrines. No. Get yourself straight. Get yourself right with the king. I love you all.